start with some Shakespeare. Golden lads and girls must, as chimney sweeps, come to dust. Tonight I'm going to tell you the story of nature's carbon cycle. And not only that, how this makes the earth tick, and how you, as a human being, is both personally and literally embedded closely and is part of that cycle. So we've come from the earth and we're going back to the earth. I'm also going to perhaps raise a question around a key piece of action we've got to do. I'm going to tell you later about one major thing we could do to help solve this problem and to rebalance the carbon cycle. You might be familiar with this phrase, I'm sure you are, that you are what you eat. So that pre-theater meal you've just had, or maybe the drink you're going to have, or the two at the intermission we'll have, the carbon atoms from all of that, well, they're in your body right now. And they're going to be in everything from your brain cells to your toenails. And those carbon atoms, well, they've been in countless other molecules since time began. There are no new carbon atoms, ever. So they've been in animals, plants, the air, in rocks. They're part of the future you and the future me. And the atoms, the carbon atoms in your body now, will be in the atmosphere and will be greenhouse gases and will be contributing to climate change in the future. So there's no doubt that we're integral to this process. It's not something out with us. So essentially, what happens in this cycle is that, for example, carbon as carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is, say, taken up by a photosynthesizing plant, and then along comes an animal and eats that plant, and then perhaps another animal, maybe a human, eats that animal, and then the animal defecates or dies, and the plant dies and decays, and then that carbon is released again into the atmosphere, perhaps, or is buried as rock or as fossil. And maybe we come along and dig up that fossil as fossil fuel later on. The problem, however, is that this is completely out of kilter. It's completely unbalanced. And we have shifted this. We've shifted the once imbalanced carbon cycle to something that now is out of balance. If you take a look at this graph, you'll see the carbon gases in the atmosphere since the year zero, and since we've been able to model those data and been able then more recently to actually measure them. And what you can see is that from the Industrial Revolution approximately onwards, there's a sharp and sudden increase of the concentration of those gases in the atmosphere. And with that then comes the greenhouse gas effect and global warming and the climate crisis that we know quite a lot about. It can get worse though. Sorry to tell you that. And it probably will. Maybe let's call it global warming 2.0. So as the planet is getting warmer, then the permafrosts, those permanently frozen soils in large tracts of the northern hemisphere, those start to thaw, and this reawakens the microbes, the bacteria present in those soils, who start eating and degrading and converting the ancient organic matter that had been locked away and stored in those soils. And they make methane gas, which actually is many times, perhaps more than 20 times more potent as a greenhouse gas than is CO2. So the problem is exacerbated. And we enter a new era of global warming. So global warming thaws the frozen environments and begets even more global warming. So we've got a big challenge, to say the least. And we need help. We need help to try to sort the mess we've made of nature's climate, or nature's carbon cycle. So I think we need to hire someone or something to help us rebalance this situation. And what if that which exacerbates the problem could actually provide a solution to our climate and energy crisis? Could some of those same bacteria that I've just mentioned, could they be part of the solution and help us out of this problem? So, got a job opportunity? Meet the candidates. Why don't we hire those microbes to help us solve this problem? Could they be what we need right at this moment of dire need for the human race? And this, I think, is the big decision we have to make, whether we actively decide to hire those microbes to do this job. So I got to thinking, like, what would we do for a job interview, and how would we consider whether we're going to make this decision? And I thought about which questions we might ask these microbes if they're candidates for this job. And the first might be, well, have you got a good reputation? And I guess maybe, but then I think, well, I think of germs and infectious diseases, and generally I think maybe microbes have a pretty bad rap, so maybe they don't. Maybe they don't have a good reputation. And I got to thinking what people think about microbes and how they engage with them in their lives. Are they prepared somehow to let them in to their understanding of what society should look like? So I thought about how we deal with microbes, say, in the news, and how we talk about them. And most of the stories aren't that great. So I'm just going to pull up one here. It's from the Mail Online. Mobile phones are 7 times dirtier than toilet seats. And then the other story there, mobile phones, 18 times more bacteria than a toilet handle. Okay, maybe it's just one story. Get another one. Back seats of Uber and Lyft cars have 35,000 times more germs than the average, you guessed it, toilet seat. And 219 times more bacteria than an average taxi. Not quite sure what's going on there. Another one, gloves. Gloves contain 5 times as much bacteria as a toilet seat. And maybe just one more, right? Steering wheels. Steering wheels, it seems, have 9 times more germs than a public toilet seat. It's pretty horrific, right? So assuming that a toilet must be pretty filthy, you should be terrified by now. I guess terrified even, say, to go to the airport and touch the screen of a check-in kiosk. So none of that actually makes any sense. None of it is surprising. Toilets are cleaned more often than, say, your keyboard or your mouse or the handle of a shopping trolley at the supermarket. And on top of that, most journalists who are given those stories to write in the Daily Mail, well, they're not even scientists. So what do they know? So these are cheap shots, I say, at the expense of the microbes. And it's clickbait. And it exacerbates the perception, the negative perception we have of the microbes. I, a few years ago, had the enormous good fortune to be a British Science Association media fellow, and I was embedded at the Irish Times newspaper in Dublin. And there I worked alongside Dick Alstrom, one of Ireland's best-loved science writers. And one of the things I learned there, as we published lots of stories, including some front-page stories on scientific topics, was that we really do need more scientists to think about trying to become journalists. Because given the existential problems we have coming down the line and the role science will play likely in trying to find solutions to those problems, I think we all are a little hungry for clarity and for information and that it's accessible. So yes, on that first question in the interview board for these microbes, reputation's a bit dodgy, but I just think they're a bit misunderstood. A little bit of PR is going to help on that. Second of my 3 questions I think I'd ask at the interview is, can you actually do the job? So, can you, as microbes, use your unique powers to degrade carbon-containing compounds and recycle them and play a really important part in the carbon cycle and help us make new alternative fuels and materials and chemicals and help us wean ourselves and our societies off fossil fuels? I think there's no question they can. There's no naturally occurring carbon-containing compound on Earth for which there isn't at least one species of microorganism that can break it down. They're going to take it all incoming. They're extremely versatile. I think they're definitely up for the job. The third question I'd ask, though, is, have you got the experience? Well, if you were to take all of the time since the formation of the planet and put it on a 24-hour clock, then the microbes arrived at something like 4 a.m. So they've been here for a long time, billions of years. We as humans, well, we kind of rocked up to the party at about 77 seconds to midnight. So yes, I think the microbes have the experience we're looking for. So I say, give them the job. They can do this, and they already do. We're already using microbial communities, complex mixtures of lots of different species in biotechnologies, and we're using them to convert organic matter, things like agricultural wastes or rotting food, or even seaweed, for example, and make the fuel and the energy and the products that we need to rebalance the carbon cycle. One of my heroes in academia, in science and in engineering, is a Dutch scientist, Gatse Lettinga. And he wrote of the carbon cycle that it was the crematorium of life. I think it's quite a nice way to think about this. He also said of the huge challenge and opportunity that I'm talking about, he said that it became his faith, vision, hope, and expectation. And I think it is that important. It is that beautiful even, the opportunity that we have to do something remarkable with science. So the bright future is going to have economies that are built on harnessing the power of the microbes to sustainably manage the carbon cycle, to give us the fuel and the energy we need, even the medicines we need, or the cosmetics, the fertilizers, and maybe even the construction materials we're going to need to build the resilient human communities that we really so desire. So let's project forward, say, 50 years to 2075. So you or your children or your grandchildren, let's hope they're going to be living in the lap of sustainable luxury. That's the promise. That's the dream, right? They might be lathering the latest must-have anti-aging face cream onto themselves, made by microbes from sewage, or whatever it is you're having yourself from the new bioeconomy we're going to build. They'll be moving around in truly sustainable transport systems, going to TEDx nights out, having sustainable meals. Their lives, yours, if you make it to 2075, or maybe even sooner, Your life will still be embedded in the carbon cycle, but we think it's going to be more in kilter because of the innovations we can achieve. So you'll remember how you got here. You'll remember that job vacancy. And you'll remember the best hire we ever made. Thank you.